Hello, Year 8, and welcome to the third week of home learning on brainwaves. This is lesson 8, feeding the body, feeding the mind. So the first task asks you to just brainstorm some ideas. The first one about the best way to feed the body to keep it healthy. And the second one, slightly trickier, is about feeding the mind and what you think that might entail in order to keep it healthy. The second task is to try and read Feeding the Body and Feeding the Mind by Lewis Carroll. Now, there's quite a lot of unfamiliar vocabulary in this text that some of you might find difficult, but really we're just focusing on what's the main gist of the text, what's the main idea. So after you've read the text, and again, remember that we're just looking for the main gist of it, the main idea. Feel free to look up the vocabulary that you find difficult at any time. During reading of the text, if you're able to do that, it might help with our understanding. So the next task is to write a summary of that text, and you can use the sentence starters. The text is about and, but, and what we want to think about is the main ideas, like we said, the gist of it. What's the writer trying to make us understand by his writing of this text? Then we come on to lesson 9. Don't worry about this being corrupted at the beginning. Doesn't make any difference. Feeding the body, feeding the mind, analysis. So the first task is thinking about what the writer, Lewis Carroll, is saying about the reading of novels. Now, this is an interesting idea, especially being at Haverstock, because we've done a lot of stuff around reading this term. Think about dear time, your own experience of reading. And then think about what Carroll is saying about reading in the text that you read in the previous lesson. So we're looking for 2 to 3 sentences at least there where you try and explain that. Then we come on to the second text, which is looking at a specific technique within writing, and that is extended metaphors. Okay, and so the explanation there, extended metaphor is when a writer takes one metaphor, and remember that's an idea that the writer uses to represent another idea in several different ways over a number of sentences. This is called an extended metaphor. In these lyrics, songwriters and performer, the Jizzer compares his fluent use of words with the running of record-breaking athlete Jesse Owens. Now, I won't wrap that to you, Year 8, but there you go. There's a good example of the extended metaphor. And what we would like you to do is to identify some in Feeding the Body and Feeding the Mind, the article, and then to move on to the challenge, which is to write an extended metaphor of your own about an idea or an aspect of one of these things. So either like being in love to being on a boat, being a teenager to the weather, and the learning of something new to a baby bird learning to fly. So the representation of a feeling or an idea there with something else to create the extended metaphor. Then we move on to lesson 10, which is a bit about structure. So, again, using the article that we read in the first lesson, Feeding the Body and Feeding the Mind, we're going to answer the questions below. So, first one, Lewis Carroll begins his article with a list: breakfast, dinner, tea, etc. Why might this list interest readers and make them want to read on? So, you're going to think about what is included in the list and why might that listing be a way that Lewis Carroll has structured the text in order for us to want to continue to read his writing. Then we're going to read again an extract from Feeding the Body and Feeding the Mind. I'm going to think about the question, why do you think Lewis Carroll uses so many exclamation marks here, and what mood is created through them? Remember what an exclamation mark denotes in a sentence. It's for increased emotion, heightened emotion in the sentence, increase in emotion. So why do you think that he might have included so many of those throughout this piece of writing and the extract above? So then we're going to look again at the paragraph for question 3, and we're going to think, why did Lewis Carroll use dialogue, speech here, and why might this be interesting to us as a reader? Remember that this is a non-fiction piece where Carroll is conversing or talking with other people. So why do you think that he uses that idea of dialogue that technique, of dialogue in the piece of writing. And then number 4 is to read the last paragraph again, the last paragraph of the piece, and to think, why does Carol use a question at the start of this paragraph, and what is the effect on the reader? How is this a good way to end a piece of writing? By phrasing a question and then answering it as the end of your text. So then we move on to lesson 11. And what we're going to do is we're going to read 2 extracts. We're going to read the first one, which is info on Victorian attitudes to novels, so Victorian ideas and feelings to novels at the time. And then we're going to read this info on modern attitudes to novels and how people feel about them in the modern world. And then we're going to think about those 2 pieces and our own ideas about reading and what Carol has said about reading and all our work across the lessons this week. And then we're going to imagine that we're a Victorian writing a letter to someone from the future, explaining to them their attitude to reading novels is all wrong. I'm going to try to make your language sound Victorian. You could use some of the words and phrases from Lewis's Carroll's article to help you. Okay, so you're going to think about writing in the perspective of someone in the Victorian era, writing to someone in the future, explaining to them that their attitude to reading novels is all wrong. And that is your learning and lessons for this week, year 9.